and whoa, I see we're recording. And that everyone was so generous in sharing. That was the thing I was really appreciating last night. I'm like smoke in my face. I'm going to move this now.
She's taking a spiritual shower over there.
Yes, exactly.
I love that. So I'm sure, Anna, there will probably be many more people joining us. More people are coming in now, but at any point, I know last time we really spent so much time setting a beautiful stage for us, making sure we really had the right environment to get into talking about a topic that's so impactful and serious and just huge. And I really appreciate that. And I know that some folks were here. Bill's, yay. Last time, maybe not everyone was. And I guess I can certainly, I don't want to keep repeating your introduction as people come in, but certainly I think people know why they're here and who they're here to hear from. My friend Anna Soole is absolutely amazing. I'm just so grateful to her. I've learned every conversation we have like opens my mind more, and I learn more, and it really is just been such a gift to know you and meet you and be talking about this topic. I know that our neighbors to the north in Canada are a little bit further along than we are here in the States in thinking about recognizing what this is and what we've done and what our past looks like and
present
and our present looks like.
Yeah.
Thank you for reminding us that this is still, I think that was one of the pieces that you've shared that really jumped out, and it jumped out in the last session too, that Indigenous are being made invisible, but they're still here. They're very much here.
Yeah, we are here. And I think there's several of us here
in this space. Yeah. That was one of the things I shared too, right? Like that, so, many of the people here today are my friends, and I know about, the sort of their racial identity, but I really didn't think much about how many people in my life have Indigenous roots, have connections to Indigenous communities, and it's just not something we talk about or share very often. And I think that's intentional, as many forms of oppression are. We are taught not to look at it or see it, or we don't. I know I told you yesterday too, I'm hoping they'll be here, but a couple friends of mine, Jennifer Gaskin and Giselle Rivera Flores, have a podcast where they had talked about this. It's called Don't Touch My. Right? It started with Don't Touch My Hair. But they both also really were tuned into how much this isn't something we're talking about or thinking about, yet it is the air we breathe, the water we, everything around us is impacted by
water is life, hashtag.
Yeah. So I think I'm just going to turn it over to you right out of the gate, because, I could go on, and I often get chance to hear from you and talk to you, and other people don't. So thank you so much for being here. We are beyond grateful for all that you bring. And this is a pretty exciting way to end the year and end the series with my beloved friend, Anna.
And I didn't realize this was the end of the series. Actually, when you said that last night, I didn't get it until I saw the poster. So that's really cool. Thank you. And I feel honored to be here. Thank you for having me. And are there people in this space that don't have their videos on? Just so I know how many people are here.
There are. It says we have 26 people, and I see quite a few. Almost everybody doesn't have their camera on. So
okay.
If you can't see them, hi, Lindsay. They are here.
Awesome. No pressure, but if you do feel like turning your camera on. It's nice to have a circle and a connection, but also totally understand if you can't put your camera on right now. Okay. Panchi, Anna Soole Deshikashun. Hi, I'm Anna Soole, and I'm so delighted to be here. And I'm so excited to see some faces from last time and some new faces. And I assume there are folks that were here last time that I just can't see you. And welcome to all the new folks and welcome back. I was spending some time this morning connecting with my ancestors, connecting with spirit, and asking what medicine we need today. And the medicine that I got was truth and gentleness. Or that's the answer that I got. It was truth and gentleness. So I even pulled that card, actually. I pulled a animal medicine card, and I got deer, which is the medicine of gentleness. And I think when we're talking about the truth, it's good for us to be gentle with each other and with ourselves. And I know that last time we spent a lot of time connecting with one another and getting to know each other and exploring our social locations in a way, our relationships to colonialism. And normally when I talk about colonialism, when I talk about genocide, when I talk about the truth of this experience, I start with that circle because it creates a sense of connection and a sense of closeness and a sense of togetherness. But also there's so much to get through, and I want to make sure that you get that information. So because we already did that, I'm going to invite you, if you haven't already watched the original workshop, to take some time when you can to watch that workshop, because there was a lot of richness alive in that space. And I want to start by recognizing the lands that I'm on, and the plants and the animals and the waterways and the people who belong here and who are responsible for these lands. I'm on the unceded, stolen homelands of the Musqueam, Skokomish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. And I also live sometimes in a little bit east, which is Stalo Nation. And so I just want to recognize that the people are still here, as the people are still here everywhere. You know, there's still Indigenous nations alive and well everywhere that you are. And the plants and the animals and the waterways are still here and are still experiencing the impacts of colonization and genocide. And that the buildings that we're in and the streets that we're on and the spaces that we inhabit under colonialism, under capitalism, are temporary. They exist here for this period of time, but that memory of the truth carries through and will continue long after this is all gone. And I want to invite you to take a second to think about the space that you're in. Think about the room that you're in or the area that you're in, and consider the materials that it's made with. Consider the shape of the room. Consider who built it and who did they build it for? And was it built for you? And if it wasn't, consider what that feels like. And if it was built for you, consider what that means too. You know, consider who it wasn't built for, and how does that impact people when the spaces that we inhabit, the spaces that we experience, they're not really for us. They never were. And when we talk about, like, sometimes I'm invited by organizations to talk about like diversity and inclusion. And I'm like, well, okay, but inclusion is one thing, but actually it's not about inclusion. It's about like, who is deciding what group needs to exist? Who is deciding what space needs to exist? And who are they deciding it exists for? Are you bringing us in just so that you can feel better? Because a lot of groups will ask, well, why can't we like retain Indigenous people, retain people of color, retain people with disabilities, retain women, retain all these marginalized groups? They come in for a couple months, but then they leave, and we just can't retain. It's because the group isn't for them. It's not by them. And so if we want to consider, what does it mean to create a culture, a community that is by all of us, for all of us? How do we do that? We have to start again. We can't start from we can't just shift it. And that's going to be some of the theme of today. And I want to recognize the reality of where I am and the reality of where you are. I'm going to invite you to take a second to think about the lands you're on and who are the original people of your land, the people who belong to this land, the people who are responsible for this land and have been since time immemorial. And if you don't know, that's probably not your fault, but after this, it will be if you don't know. It's not your fault because we're not taught. We're not taught that, and we're not taught to even wonder that, unless you've already had those conversations and those learnings. So I want to invite you to consider that, and to consider the lands that you were born on, the lands that your grandmother is from, and your grandmothers are from. What lands were they born on, and who are the people that belong to those places? And when I say belong, it's from an Indigenous worldview. So if you want to think of it from a colonial worldview, who do those lands belong to? That's what we're really saying from a colonial worldview, is that the lands here are stolen, they're unsurrendered, they're unceded. They don't belong to the colonial powers. They don't belong to the people who are settlers. They belong to the Indigenous people, except from an Indigenous worldview, we don't have a concept of ownership. That's not part of our worldview. Our concept is responsibility, relationship, reciprocity, belonging. So that's why I say, who are the people who belong here? And it's a bit soft. It's soft because that's an Indigenous way, is to be soft and gentle, also fierce and strong. But I feel like it's important to temper that with what it really, really means from a colonial perspective, also, what it really means to be here. So I also want to recognize, I want to feel my feet on the ground, and I want to invite you to feel your feet on the ground, or wherever you are. Feel your back against the chair behind you, or whatever you're sitting on. Feel that under you, and just allow that strength to be there to fill you, and to remind you that you do have support while we talk about what we're talking about today, because I want to talk about some of the more painful things that we didn't get to last time. And it's important to me that we ease ourselves into that, which is why it took 2 sessions to get here. Because in order for it to really land in our bodies, in our spirits, our minds, and our hearts, we need to take the time that is human, that makes sense, that is part of our nature. And Amy was using a really good metaphor yesterday, like we need fertile soil, we need that fertile soil. Otherwise, it's just words. Otherwise, it's just ideas. And for me, in my own practice, I want words and ideas to become actions and practices. And I know that in order for that to happen, it needs to be done with immense care and intention. And so I thank you all for being here. And I thank you all for being here last time, those of you who were able to be, because we created something really beautiful together. It was really powerful, and I feel really honored to be a part of that. And I feel really honored to be a part of this here today with you as well. I feel emotional this morning. I can feel my heart open. I feel there's a tenderness, and I don't know if other people are feeling that. Bill, thank you for your heart. I see that. Yeah, and I feel I bring the medicine to strengthen me and to strengthen all of us. And thank you so much for being here, and thank you to your ancestors who have guided you here, and my ancestors who have guided me here, who are with all of us, and all my relations. Let's begin. So I want to ask if there's anyone here who was here last time or who has watched the workshop from last time, if there's anything that you want to share about your experience from that session together, or any questions that you might have, or anything that you want to bring forth here today. So sometimes it's hard to be the first person to speak. So I want to invite you to do a little warm up with me. It's a little goofy, but if you can take, if your body does this, if you can take one limb, preferably a hand if you have that, and make an X with that hand or that limb, or with your tongue or something, and then with another limb, make a circle. And then if you would like, you could take one hand and pat the top of your head, or find another limb and pat a part of your body, and then make a circle on your stomach. Okay, thank you. Just to get us in our bodies, just to get us alive a little bit. And if you would like to share or ask anything to start, I would like to invite somebody, especially if there is someone who is Indigenous, but or a person of color, or a person who's experienced colonialism. If you have something you want to say to start, you're welcome to. No pressure.
I can take a shot at that. I wish I could remember exact specifics, and I was just looking for my notes, but I can't find them now. But because as I get older, my memory just goes. But I remember having a feeling the last time that it was a very inclusive conversation. I really felt closer to my Native American roots, just being able to think about them and recognize that, like you were kind of alluding to before, there aren't a lot of spaces at all around where I can do that on a regular basis. And so this was a very good conversation to have, and we're having today, and I truly appreciate it.
Thank you, Belle. Thank you. And you brought a lot of good medicine, I remember, to the last one too. Would anyone else like to share?
Sure. I'm not on camera today, but I just want to, in the same line as Bill, appreciate and acknowledge how grateful and thankful I am for the acknowledgement of how painful, how much pain and hurt and resilience and love there is still in relation to colonization. Even though it may have started 400, 500 years ago, it has not ended.
Exactly. Thank you. And if you're not already on gallery, I would invite you to be on gallery if you can. Call it gallery view, just so that we can see each other. So it's like we're in a circle. Levi, I see your hand is up.
Hi, I'm Levi. I really I found this group, and like it's so, like everyone is saying, is like so rare to like be able to talk about these things, even though it's becoming more popular on social media. We don't really talk about the layers and how like even in modern times colonization is evolving, and we tend to just like see colonization and how like it was in the past and not how it's evolving now. And then we don't really talk about it. Yeah. So thank you for holding this space.
Thank you. Speaking of which, I asked this last time and I'll ask it again. I know that you're here voluntarily, I think, and that everyone has chosen to come here, but I really want to make sure to ask you from my heart if you would be willing to give me permission, and you can always revoke it, so your consent. If you'd be willing to give me your consent to be in this position, to continue to be in this position for these 2 hours, to hold this space and to be in service to the circle and to share some difficult truths, but also some liberating truths. And if you are open to it, you can put a hand on your, like a reaction up, or you can twinkle your fingers, or just give some kind of visual cue, or you could write it in the chat, which Amy will pay attention to. And thank you. And if anybody isn't open to that, I really want to hear that. And thank you. I see your comments. And we can have a conversation. If there's somebody who's like, no, this doesn't work, we can try to understand that together. Okay, I think we're good. And again, you can always come back to that. And if I mess it all up, you can be like, hey, I changed my mind. So all right. So if anybody has anything else they'd like to share, please, you're welcome to. So I wanted to share this. I want to ask you, what is colonialism? What is it? And if people want to share with your voices, that would be great. If you write it in the chat, maybe Amy can read the chat to us. I see your hand up, Wanda. Yes.
Hi, so I think, I'm not sure. This is my first time being here. Amy's been trying to get me and I'm finally here.
Yay, welcome.
Thanks. The colonialism, I think, to me, is those people that came here and basically lied and stole the land, raped the wives and killed the kids and the husbands, and just did horrific things that we don't talk about. And I'm curious to follow up your question. Does that colonialism translate, because in my mind it does, gentrification?
Yes.
Because I feel like our gentrification in the city of Worcester is another attack by the colonizers, and because the majority of the people who are making the decisions are from colonizer descendants, and it is what it is. And politically, we have a lot of issues, and I feel like the two are the same.
Yes. I mean, that's just a very astute observation. Absolutely. It is one and the same, because it is part of the culture of colonization, right? Gentrification is the sensation of, I like that, I take it, it's mine. And if you're there, it doesn't matter. You're not relevant, especially if you don't have as much power or access or funds as I do, or capital, whether that be social capital or whatever, it's very, very much the same, one and the same. Does anybody have anything you want to say about that?
And I can read some of the people wrote some
Perfect.
good things in the chat. We have othering, greed, superiority complex, hate.
Wait, slow down. I'm writing these for us. Superiority complex.
Othering. Did you get that one?
Yes, I did.
Greed, commodification, land governance, and values usurped by a foreign entity for the benefit of the colonists.
I can't write that, but that's so good. Can you say that one more time?
Yeah. This is from Michael. Land, governance, and values usurped by a foreign entity for the benefit of the colonists and to the detriment of the colonized.
Boom. Exactly.
Right?
That's exactly right.
I also have an invasive practice that seeks to dominate and erase the original people and their way of being. Entitlement.
Exactly. Entitlement and erasure. You said one more thing. Erase, dominate.
Dominate. Yeah. Wow.
Those are some of the words. I didn't get all of them, but that's a lot. Yeah. So there is going to be pain here today when we talk about this, because it's painful and it is affecting every single human being on planet Earth, whether you're a colonizer or you're colonized, which we are all colonized. Because to become a colonizer, you had to be colonized somewhere along the lines, and it's a deep, deep, deep body trauma, spirit trauma. It's trauma through every system. And so whether or not we are aware of it, it's affecting every decision that we make, every action that we take, every word we speak is related to colonization. And so when we open up that wound, it can bring up a lot. It can open up a lot. So I really want to invite you to consider, before we continue, what are the things that I need to take good care of myself today? What are the things that I need to, the practices that I need in place, the things that I need in my environment, and what can I do after this workshop? How can I plan after this workshop to make sure that I'm not going to be super vulnerable or in a super vulnerable place, or if I am, that I can protect myself to the best of my ability. Just, going gently with yourself. So this is a lot. It's a lot. And there's many words that stood out to me, but I really want to talk about this word, raped, because I want to talk about the relationship between rape culture and colonialism. So I want to ask you, what is rape culture? And remember to breathe. Yeah.
I was thinking the same things that we said about entitlement, commodification, power over, victimization. Oh, I love that, Levi. To take without permission, objectification, entitlement, the patriarchy, the sort of might is right.
Oh my God, there's so many good words.
Right? That was a conversation you and I had too, like the recognition that both of our countries were really born from rape culture. Like they're the original, take without asking,
Exactly.
No permission. You're here for our enjoyment and pleasure and nothing else. And wow, that really is a painful realization.
Yeah. So Does anybody have anything else they want to say about that, about rape culture or about colonialism?
There were two more comments put in that I think are really important too. Ignoring consent. I know that the first session, it really struck people that you asked us for our permission. And we almost all of us said, no, we've never been asked before by a leader for permission to lead. And Bill wrote, taking something by force that doesn't belong to you.
Mm-hmm. Now I'm getting messy, so I'm just gonna put that down. But yeah, take by force, exactly. Take something that doesn't belong to you, or even having the concept that I can take that from you, like I'm entitled to that. And I want to share, like, this is a dream catcher. Some of you may have seen dream catchers before. Dreamcatcher is part of Anishinaabe culture. So I'm Red River Métis. I forgot to introduce myself in that way, but I did it in the first workshop. I'm Red River Métis. My ancestry is Cree, Anishinaabe, Lakota, French, Celtic, Welsh, Gaelic, German. And in my culture, we make dream catchers. Now, dream catchers are, does anybody have any teachings around dream catchers actually? What have you noticed about dream catchers in the popular culture?
Go ahead and jump right in,
Yes,
Leva.
yeah, just jump right in. Yeah.
Oh, I recently learned that I've noticed that like dream cultures is very commodified in like in capitalism. Like they kind of like mass produce it, and they don't know like indigenous cultures, like how like they make it, the meaning behind it, the materials they use, which is from nature.
Yes, exactly. Thank you. So I mean, a lot of the time I see dream catchers like hanging from people's car, like mirror, or, but a dream catcher is literally a dream. It catches our dreams. And there's a hole, I don't know if you can see the hole in the middle, that lets our good dreams go through, and it catches our bad dreams. And dream time is such a sacred practice. I had an elder tell me that her entire culture is led by matriarchs, and they dream their policy. They dream their laws. Their practice is to intentionally create dream space. And that's where they get their leadership and their governance from, is from the grandmothers dreaming together. And so a dream catcher is not just a commodity, it is a sacred practice. And when you make a dream catcher for a newborn baby, you don't have to leave the hole in the middle, because newborn babies don't actually have, they're so pure, they don't have all that shadow going on inside their minds to create these bad dreams. So we have this seed or button or bead. This is made out of abalone shell. And the abalone shell was gifted to my program. I work with Indigenous girls, and we have talking circles together. And this was gifted to my program by one of the mentors in my group. And it was made by her mother, who is an Indigenous artist, and it was gathered in a good way. Every single thing about a dream catcher or about anything that we create has meaning and purpose. And the willow that the circle is made from, I take this every year from a willow fence that my mother made in one of the public parks here. She was a horticulturist in her career days, and she built a living fence. And I go there and I ask permission from the fence to take the bark or take the willow, and then I make the boughs with intention and I bring them to the group. Every single thing. This is from my grandmother. These are flicker feathers that my grandmother gathered for me. Every single thing about anything that we make that's Indigenous has meaning and purpose. It's not just a dream catcher. And you hang it because you don't hang it against a wall, because then the dreams can't get through. So you hang it, and the reason hang on, I can't reach. The reason I'm sharing that is because cultural appropriation is another example of that entitlement culture, that culture of entitlement, of taking. And I want people to understand how our arts, like our songs are prayer, our dance is prayer, our creativity is prayer. It's a deep practice, and it's not nothing. And the dream catcher also, when our people were not allowed to practice our culture, because the understanding of like our art it didn't matter to colonizers, we could still make our dream catchers even though we couldn't practice. And so what people would do is they would put the dream catcher in the window so you could see that that's a family, that it's safe to practice your culture in their home, even though it's illegal and you'll be jailed if they find out. So it was also a way of subverting the colonial power when it was illegal to practice our culture. So these things are important, and bringing it back to rape culture, that sense of entitlement and that sense of taking, it branches out into everything. Our sage, the white buffalo sage is now endangered because it's being sold, in just even like popular stores, just popular stores. And so when I go into like a health food store and I see the sage being sold, it hurts me to my bones, and I imagine there's lots of people who can experience that. It hurts me because it's contributing to harm. There's lots of things that you can burn, and you may have that from your own ancestors too. Like if you're not Indigenous, maybe you're from Europe, and rosemary is something you can burn, or there's different things you can burn for cleansing and clearing. That's why people are upset and angry about cultural appropriation, is because it is part of a culture of theft. Amy, are there any comments that you feel like you could share with us? I just can't follow it.
Yeah, sure. People, said just about the appropriation, that things are misrepresented. It's seen as cute decor, commercial benefit, misrepresentation. Angie says, from my native culture, they capture negative thoughts and dreams, and I wonder why I can purchase one at Spencer's in the mall. Very appropriate, which is pretty much what you said about big corporations. Mm-hmm. Tanya said, thanks for sharing. I too often see dream catchers hanging in rear view mirrors. John Moyer says he uses corporate junk mail to make art, which, is kind of more culturally relevant for us. Right. And then Angie also said that sage is sacred to her people as well. And I think people really resonated with this idea that the stolen things, that we try to take them and have them be what they were, but they're just not when they're stolen.
Yes. And they're not. And that's exactly right. It gives bad medicine, So colonialism is number one, land theft. That's I can't remember the names of the authors. Maybe if anyone here knows the names. Decolonization is not a metaphor. This is our essay. Does anybody know the names? I can't remember right now. I'll look it up and I'll send it. But decolonization is not a metaphor. It's not an idea. It's a real practical practice. Decolonization is about land back, right? And colonialism is land theft. at its base core. Everything else is in service of that land theft. So being here, if you're not Indigenous, it means something. It means something being here. And that's why it's not in the past. That's one of the reasons why it's not in the past. It's now. It's still now. Right? So land theft, it's genocide. Genocide includes killing culture, killing language. It's, yes, killing people, but it's also, you know, the buffalo were slaughtered, and there's pictures of piles of buffalo that weren't eaten, just piles of buffalo to kill the main food source of Plains Indigenous people. That was an active decision that was made. An active decision that was made. And my people, who are buffalo people, were no longer able to be nomad. That we couldn't be nomadic because we didn't have our food source. So our entire culture changed. And so it's genocide, it's gaslighting, which, you know, is making a person believe that the opposite of reality is real over time, you know. And it's still happening. It's still happening right now. You know, there's pipelines being built on Indigenous lands. There's Indigenous communities with no access to water. There's Indigenous communities who have no access to healthcare, have no access to food, like literally, like food is like $20 for a loaf of bread. I mean, this is real and now. Colonialism is a culture rooted in entitlement and no consent. It's systemic control over Indigenous peoples and lands achieved through invasion and conquest. And settler colonialism is different than overt colonialism in that it's like settling in a subtle way. So like the genocide is less violent, although it's still really violent, but the genocide is residential and boarding schools, taking children off their land and out of their communities, away from their families. And let me see if I can find this. These tiny handcuffs were found on a residential school site. Remember to keep breathing, please. Please take good care of yourselves. I know this is really hard to hear. And I want to ask you, when you see that, what comes up for you? What's alive in you?
Yeah, that brought up quite a bit of anger and disappointment in me. I mean, I can't imagine why you would ever want to handcuff a child in a school environment, which is, I think, how you set the stage. So, you know, I just don't. Yeah, that I can't see that.
Regular practice. Yeah. I mean, regular practice to torture and put children in solitary confinement. You know, please remember to keep taking good care of yourself. But sexual abuse was a normal practice in residential school. And residential school here in Canada, so you have boarding schools, but it's one and the same. It's the same thing. But residential school here, the last one here closed in 1996. I was 16 years old in 1996. So, yeah, who was the real savage? Exactly. Thank you, Michelle. Yeah, who was the real savage? Exactly. Yes, Michael.
OCO, thank you so much for having me in the space. Come from mixed descent, but my native side is Eastern Band Cherokee. And the first thing that comes to mind, I look at those handcuffs, and that brings up the whole concept that people were criminalized for being their authentic selves. And when we do that, that allows us to dehumanize people. And then it makes it easier for us to treat them in less than human ways, treat them more like chattel and cattle.
Yes, you're doing my workshop for me. That's one of my points. Exactly. Thank
I
you.
do.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi. I have a whole section on dehumanization. We'll get there. So yeah, exactly. It's a dehumanizing practice. Oh, yeah. So Canada, I live in Canada, so-called, is rape culture. They're one and the same. And the US is rape culture. It is inherently at its roots, rape culture. And if we want to end rape culture, we have to end the nations that are inherently rape culture. That's the only way. They are born out of rape culture, and the imaginary, the story of the US and the story of Canada, they are literally just that. They are imaginary. It's not real. It isn't real. And I know the US really teaches. I see you, Michael, and I see your hand up. Or is that an accident? Okay. I know that the US, like, we get a lot of US media. So when you're not part of the US, you know more about the US than anybody in the US knows about you, for sure. And so, and because you're an outsider, you can see it maybe with a different kind of clarity. And there is such a nationalistic, I don't know. I want to ask you about that. Like, what is your experience of that nationalism, that intense, almost like people often say, I'm an American, instead of saying I'm a human. That's not a thing here. Like, we don't say I'm a Canadian. Like it's often when you should say I'm a human, but people will say I'm an American. So what does that bring alive for you? Like, what does that mean to you, and how do you experience that in this context? Privilege. I see that. Yeah.
Anna, Noel has his hand up.
Oh, I don't see that. So speak away, Noel.
Hi, Anna. First and foremost, I want to say thank you for hosting this. I am a advocacy person, and I work for an organization that's nonprofit, but we deal mostly in addiction and in recovery. And one of the things that I've been working very closely with is the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe, and working with them on addiction and recovery, and try to provide resources and any kind of assistance that we can to help the nation. But I too am Taino Indian from Puerto Rico. And when you talked about so many things that I'm sitting here going, oh my God, all the things that you're describing are things that have occurred to Puerto Rico and to the indigenous. And many people don't know that there's a Tainos indigenous community in Puerto Rico.
Mm-hmm.
And every country that floated by Puerto Rico wanted to conquer Puerto Rico. Every one of them. And when you talked about taking away your dignity or your identity, I don't know if many people see during the summer, a lot of Spanish Puerto Ricans put the Spanish flags on their car, on their windshield, on their windows. They got the little boxing gloves with the Puerto Rican flag, because for many years the United States would not let Puerto Rico fly their flag. And when you talked about the killing of thousands, what they did to the women in Puerto Rico, during the 60s and 70s, and that's not talked about. And these are things that, in this country, it for me, when I sit and I think about the United States, and you just mentioned this, we're proud to be an American, that song that, they boast, what are you proud of? When I think about, what Christopher Columbus did, Christopher Columbus was a murderer. What he did to the community. And the thing about it's not being talked about because in this country, they don't teach they don't teach US history or world history. They teach US history or, American history. They don't teach world history. And the world history is what documents a lot of the things that were done that were harmful, that were damaging, that were just crude, and to be able to think about, and thank you, because I say this, I never thought about it being rape culture. But when you tie those two together, it's such, and you can't help but tie it together now because you just put it out there, and you're talking about colonization and rape culture and thinking about how people decided, I'm better than you, I'm taking your land, I'm better than you, I'm killing your babies, I'm better than you, I'm killing your family, I'm better than you, I'm going to force you on my boat to go to another country, to represent my king and show my king what I did in this other little country. It's unbelievable to look at it this way. And I'm sitting here going, wow, I'm completely blown away right now. And I'm already, like, I'm in this country, I'm in America, I work in this country, I try to help as many people as I can doing what I do. But to think about colonization and how much that has, and how tied it is to rape, I'm sitting here with the eyes wide open. It's like I'm blown away. So thank you so much for sharing all that.
Wow. There's so much fire in your voice. It just feels so alive. Thank you. Thank you for your fire. It's so good. It's so good to hear that fire. And thank you for sharing that, acknowledging that realization too, because I think probably a lot of people are having that experience. And how many people, you can write in the chat or raise your hand, how many people are feeling overwhelmed and or angry or mixed feelings right now? How many people are having that experience? Yeah. So I just want to be with that and honor that, because that's real. And we are nervous systems, our aliveness is energy, it is emotion. And that when that's there, we have to be with that, and colonialism is terrified of us being with that. Colonialism requires us to repress our experience, repress our emotions, repress our humanness, our vulnerability, in service of shaming us for being human, because shame is the most powerful colonial weapon there is. We'll talk about that a little bit, but just be with that experience. And it's painful. What is the purpose of anger? Why do we as human beings experience anger? What is it telling us?
Something is wrong.
Boom. Something is wrong. It is this part of us that loves us. Our anger is self-love or love for someone who's being harmed. True anger is love. That's what it is. Now, because we learn to be afraid of anger or to twist anger, it gets repressed and it often comes out as discharge. We're discharging it onto someone because we don't know how to deal with it. We don't know how to deal with the power of our own anger, right? So that we've been shamed for our anger in our youth because anger is so powerful. We were shamed for saying no. We were shamed for having an opinion that's different from everyone else. We were shamed for whatever was coming through us as a child in our family because they were shamed for it, and so we repress it, and it either goes toward the self and we harm ourselves, which tends to happen in people who are assigned to be female more often, or it goes out towards someone else, which tends to happen for people who are assigned male more often. Not always, but that's sort of the binarized stereotype for kind of a reason. It happens a lot that way. So going out with the anger to hurt the other person, to get the hurt out of the self. It's like, I'm trying to get it out, but it's going to go on to you, right? That's why people end up being violent with one another and with themselves, because they have true feelings inside of them that deserve to be acknowledged, right? But then they get twisted, and those original emotions that might have existed when they were young, they become like the base story, and then there's all these other stories, and we have all these defenses against those emotions that live inside of us. The defenses keep us from having to experience guilt or anger or fear, or grief. And all of our emotions are such gifts. They're such gifts. They have so much to tell us and so much to offer us, and they propel us in life. Our emotions are our propellers, and colonialism requires us to be robots, to be inhuman. Colonialism does not want us to experience our true emotions. So we don't learn how to, most of us don't learn how to do that from when we should have learned, which is like right away, because we didn't have any models for it. We didn't have any models for that. That's one of the first things you should be experiencing and learning is how to, the word like regulate is like a word that gets thrown around, but what I mean is how to experience your own emotions in a true way, and how to be with them without them taking over. It doesn't mean to get rid of them, though, like how to be with them. And if we're going to do decolonization, if we're going to do anti-oppressive work, if we're going to do healing work, if we're going to talk about trauma, we absolutely, number one, first have to learn how to experience our own emotions. That's the first thing, because it is an emotional experience to explore this. It's an emotional experience to talk about violence, to be violated, to have been violated. It is emotional. And we are all, if you are under colonization, you absolutely have learned to fear your own emotions. There's no question. There's no question. And your emotions are power. They're power. The behavior that comes from them when we don't know how to experience them is not the emotion. People are like anger is a secondary emotion. No, anger is a genuine emotion that deserves its own space. And anger is not violence. Violence is violence. Anger is energy. That's what it is. And so is grief. And it's okay to be, for people who have been like, I have a lot of space in my life for grief. I'm okay. I can handle grief. I have a harder time for me with anger. So I'm working on that. But a lot of people are not comfortable with grief, and they go to anger first. Like we have the things that we're comfortable with because it was okay in our family. And then we have the things that we're not comfortable with because it wasn't okay in our family, or it wasn't okay because of our socialization, our training, our gendering, our racialization, whatever it is, we had to learn to deal with certain different emotions in different ways. So for me, I grieve easily, but my own fire, my own power, and my own voice, I have to seek it. I have to give it time. I have to look for it. And so I really encourage everyone here, if you're not already doing this, to take the time to know, like, what are your emotions you're defended against? Where have you developed complex defenses to not experience certain emotions? And when we're talking about colonialism, often we have major defenses also against guilt, and that creates a fragility. So if a person is a settler, Bill, if it's okay with you, there was a question you put in the chat last time that we never got to. Is it okay with you if I read this? Thank you. Why is it so hard for people living here to acknowledge the colonization of the land and how we continue to treat Indigenous and other peoples because they aren't white European? Honestly, it's because of this. It's because of our inability to experience our own authentic emotions and respond to them in a meaningful way. That's a big part of why. It's a big part of it. So thank you for that question, because it like really, I was like, oh, I want to make sure I get to that one today. Does anybody have, yes, guilt, exactly. Does anybody have anything they want to say about what we've said so far, or is what's coming up, what's alive right now?
Well, I literally had that thought in my head. I forgot that I had asked that question. I was getting ready to put that out there again. So it's obviously very strong in my spirit. The other thing, to dovetail on a conversation a couple of minutes ago, I find the American flag and the love for it and the propping up of it all the time to be extremely obnoxious.
Yes.
I know I'm a photographer, so I photograph things all the time. And I remember the last photograph I took of the flag was in and around 2012 on a year-long assignment. And sometime after that, I had this epiphany, and I refuse to salute the flag. I refuse to photograph the flag. I will not stand up and salute for the flag. I will not sing the whatchamacallit of independence, because I think it's all bullshit.
Yeah.
You know, and I think you hit it earlier before, and I'd say this all the time, is that why is it that somebody told me once to take a look at the Olympics, the opening ceremonies. Who is the only team that gets introduced and comes out doing this everywhere? It's the United States. And I think it's obnoxious that we don't consider ourselves human first, don't take care of all of us first, and then instead of drawing lines and like pushing people out, keeping people out, and that kind of thing, or taking their stuff. So
thank you so much. And you just inspired a thought, which is when I was speaking about like, I'm an American, that statement, I think that from an outsider perspective, how I experience that is, I'm a human and you're not if you're not an American. That's how I experience that. Yeah. So it's a dehumanizing practice to anyone who isn't American. Yeah. And also in response to your comment, I don't know if you can see that with the reflection. Can you see that? Let me see. It's another way of looking at the American flag. These are all red lines. I just did it in black and white. And these are all teepees that have been crossed out, symbolizing, obviously, Indigenous communities, Indigenous nations.
that is so powerful.
Right. Yeah, I don't know who it's from. I found it on like Facebook like 15 years ago. Yeah. Does anybody else want to say anything?
I,
Yeah.
I was actually just recently I was talking to my mom about that, about how like what's the difference between like Puerto Ricans showing their flag and like my fellow Puerto Ricans showing their flag and Americans showing their flag, and how like a lot of Americans tend to be more like prejudiced, and like when they usually you see a car with a flag, and usually that's usually a sign that like they're not really safe, and like they're probably gonna dehumanize the other.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Colonialism is founded on not belonging. It's founded on shame. And the most effective weapons of the oppressor are guns and shame. This already is the Indigenous post-apocalypse. We're already in it. Indigenous people have already experienced our apocalypse. So when people talk about like, oh, it's like COVID is the apocalypse, or like the fires are the apocalypse, or no, like, yeah, but also we've already been in it for a long time. So the indigenous post-apocalypse, or the indigenous apocalypse, includes destruction of land and water. That has been happening to our people, to our places for hundreds of years. And now it's catching up with the rest of the world. It's not new. It's been already happening. Climate disaster is just catching up, and now it's starting to hit. It's starting to hit the colonizers, but just barely, and it will continue as a result of a lack of respect for our relations with the land and the water. The post-apocalypse includes eradication of our populations. It's called genocide, and I'm an example, as a white appearing indigenous person. I appear white because there was an active movement to breed us out, and so if they can make us believe we're not indigenous, then we don't exist. And if we don't exist, then the land is available. And so I know there's probably people here who have indigenous ancestry who don't know if you may not feel entitled to it. And there's something valuable in that. Yeah, we need to do the work. We need to do the research. We need to find where we're from. We need to make connections. We need to figure out who our relations are if you've been displaced. We need to figure out who, if you can't find your relations because it was stolen so effectively, we need to learn our responsibilities as Indigenous people. We need to have practices that are respectful of Indigenous people who've been raised in their culture, and yet you are still Indigenous. You are still Indigenous, and that your ancestors know who you are. They know who you are and they love you, and I have the privilege of knowing who my ancestors are because they were known and they were recorded for their resistance against the Canadian state. So as a white appearing Indigenous person who's displaced, I still had access to finding out who I am and where I come from. I know a lot of Indigenous people don't have that because colonization and genocide has been so successful. And sometimes there's conflict in the Indigenous community about who's really Indigenous. And that's important to pay attention to. But at the same time, it's also important for you to pay attention to your spirit when your spirit is calling. We don't appropriate from other people's culture. Find out as much as you can in good faith, and go humbly and listen. If you haven't reclaimed, go humbly and listen and pay attention, and walk the good red road. And just remember, your ancestors know who you are and they love you. And when you speak their name, when you speak their languages, when you speak their practices and traditions, they wake up. Your ancestor spirits wake up. They feel that love, and they feel connected, and they are thankful and they're proud. So this is really for the Indigenous people in the space, because I know it's a complicated thing, who belongs and who doesn't belong. And I want to say to you, you matter and you belong, and yes, we have to do it in a good way. We have to do it in a good way, because there's people who have been raised in their culture who have a lot of harm because of that, experience a lot of harm, but they also have experienced potentially a lot of connection that we didn't get to experience. So, or you might not have been able to experience. So I just want to say all of that. Does anybody have anything you want to say about that?
Yes, Anna, I do. This is Tanya speaking, and I'm so glad that you shared that with us. I don't know, I've always kind of discounted what my mom said. She would always say, we're Cherokee, and Sioux Indian, and I was like, I'm like, I don't look like them, you know, I look Black. And so I'm so glad to hear this, because I think I want to do some more research to really see. And there is a picture of my great grandfather, and I think he is listed as Cherokee. So I wanted to do some more research about that. But I also, as you were speaking, I was reminded of years ago when my daughter was just a baby, and I took her to a museum exhibit about the Narragansett tribe. My husband is a Narragansett, and you know, we were just walking around, and one of the tribal members was, you know, looking at the exhibit as well, and turned and said to what happened to be my husband's great uncle, "Oh, these Black people, like, why are they here?" And she didn't realize that that I was the wife of a Narragansett tribal member, and that my child is also. And I was so hurt. And you know what my response was? It was terrible response, but I decided I'm never bringing my children down to the reservation. Like, I would teach them about their history, but I would never bring them down there, because they were so rude and ignorant and just hateful. And they had this hate towards those that lived on the reservation and those that chose to come into the city. And, you know, I really regret that. Thank God my children are on the roll, and they've, you know, they're embracing their history, but, you know, it's just unfortunate. So thank you so much for bringing that up and sharing it and opening, giving us that space to talk about that.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Displacement is so painful. It's so painful. And I'm so sorry that you've had to deal with that. And I just feel really honored and thankful that you shared. And I'm so glad for your children. That's so awesome. And I hope that you will take this and you will find out and you will do the research and build those relationships, you know, be in right relationship if you can. And I want to speak also to, like, you know, like in a lot of Indigenous communities, there's a lot of lateral violence that we learn from colonization. Like, it's a colonized mindset to like everyone's a threat, and that makes sense when you're trying to survive. Everyone's a threat, and it's so painful to when you don't look the way that you like who you are. And one thing I really want to bring is, like, so my culture as Métis people, we have this teaching that, like, we are the rainbow people. We look like everybody. We look like white people. We look like brown people. We look like Black people. We look like anybody because we're mixed. Métis literally means mixed. And we are the rainbow nation. And I think I said this last time, but when you mix two colors together, you don't get 50% red and 50% blue. You get purple. You get a whole entirely new color. And so when you have many cultures in you, in your ancestry, in your, like, running through your body, you're not a percentage. You are a new mixture that is all of you. You know, I'm not a piece of pie. Like, my arm isn't Indigenous. Like, my whole body, you know, I am Indigenous. And this is what Indigenous also looks like. And you are what Indigenous also looks like. And it's important for me as a person who doesn't necessarily, I'm not experienced as Indigenous in most spaces, unless people know who I am. And then, yeah, but like, it's my responsibility as, like, your story is totally different, but as a white appearing person, it's my responsibility to speak up, you know, against anti-Indigenous racism and against all racism. because it's safer for me to do that, right? But it's also not always safer for me to do that. And if there's a white person in the room who's not Indigenous, they can do it. Thank you. You know? And so for you, your story is totally different, but I really want to recognize, like, we are all complex. We are so complex, and those complexities and nuances are so beautiful and also dangerous for us sometimes, but also dangerous to the construction of race and racialization, dangerous to the constructions of gender, dangerous to colonial power. Our existence is dangerous. And so I want to invite you, like, when you're feeling the danger of your own experience, to remember how dangerous you are to them. You're dangerous for them, you know? So eradication of population, going back to my list. Actually, you know what? I'm not going to just jump away. I want to just feel that for a second, because I can sort of feel like my nervous system. Does anybody else want to speak?
Yes, Anna, this is Noel Sierra. You know, doing the research, you know, I found myself, even though I'm Taino, I found myself sitting at the feet of the elders of the Mashpee Wampanoag. And hearing from them. Learning from them. And embracing truths that transform. Sitting down with some elders of mine and learning from them. If you're going to learn from anyone, sit with the elders. They have many a history to share, many knowledge to give.
Yeah.
And to be able to just learn. Sometimes we want to, and I find myself in this situation a lot, and I've had to learn it myself, is I need to just shut up and listen so I can learn. And you learn not to create anger and hate, but to create knowledge and wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
Be able to use what you learn and put into practices the good things that will help you be a better person and help individuals look at you as that better person as well. So the history that plagues some of us, we can let two things happen. You can let fear and anger, or you can let it create peace and joy, you know, and what you decide to do with that. You know, we can get angry and we can create chaos, or we can learn from this history and create peace and joy.
Thank you, Noel. And I also want to add to what you're saying. First of all, elders, absolutely. If you can find elders that will hold space with you, yeah, you know, earned elders who have earned their leadership or their wisdom. And also I want to just say, like, I really want to reiterate, there's a difference between the emotions of anger and fear and the actions of violent actions that sometimes those emotions lead to, because our anger can also lead to peace. Our anger can lead to love. Our anger comes from love. I just want to be really clear about that, because I want us to remember that our emotions are there as our friends. You know, the first time I ever actually experienced my anger, like, really, I was still. I was completely still and not stuck and not frozen. I was still. And I felt energy moving through my whole entire body. This fire, this power. It felt actually very powerful, not power over, but true power. I felt the power in me of change and action. And it was a completely different experience than all of the other ways that anger had come out of me before. It was so beautiful and filled with love. And so I want to just make sure that we parse the difference between our experience of our emotions and then our behavior that might be twisted because of that. Yeah. So I feel like weird going back to this because we went on such a good tangent, but plagues of illness, you can keep your blanket. Constant survival mode and traumatization. This is what happens with Indigenous apocalypse. Widespread complex PTSD. And that is one of the other things I want to speak to. It's when we experience that lateral violence, what's often happening as Indigenous people, what's often happening is literal PTSD, complex PTSD. People are walking around profoundly traumatized for generations and then taking it out on each other. And so that's a thing. And being in the post-apocalypse, it's also, we're taking efforts to reclaim all that we've lost. We are resisting, we are strong, and we are still here. We are alive, and we are celebrating who we are. Decolonization is land back, land back, land back, land back, land back. That's what it is. And that doesn't mean go home, colonizer, because that's impossible. It's not get out of here. It's how do we, there are many Indigenous scholars who have so much wisdom about how to do this well. And there are many examples of people who are, settlers who are contributing to land back, who are participating in land back. And what it means is Indigenous sovereignty and Indigenous governance. That's really what it means. It's Indigenous leadership making decisions about how we inhabit these lands. That's what that means. How are we going to be together with Indigenous leadership, with Indigenous decision making, Indigenous governance, and not colonial ways, not recreating the colonial ways, with the leadership that exists, not replacing that with Indigenous people, starting again from Indigenous practices. Decolonization is not a metaphor. It is Indigenous peoples reclaiming and re-indigenizing ourselves first. It's us healing and being given opportunity and resources to heal by the people who have taken from us, reparation, but also taking it for ourselves, doing it for ourselves when we are able to, providing for each other. So I work with Indigenous girls, and we have talking circles, and it's so profound, creating Indigenous spaces where we can be together and we can talk about our lives and we can heal. It's settlers listening, learning, and making reparations. It's overturning colonial structures, and I put hashtag and Canada, but also and US. Listen to and respect Indigenous leadership. Follow and learn Indigenous protocols because they exist, and they exist where you are. So find out what the protocols of the nations where you are. One of the protocols here on West Coast of Canada is you announce whose land you're on and you announce where you are from. You always recognize it and name it. Realize Indigenous liberation. Realize it, make it real. Respect Indigenous sovereignty. Practice Wakotawin, which is the understanding that we are all related. Everything is in relationship. and that we have responsibilities to that in reciprocity with everything in creation. Grow meaningful, reciprocal relationships. Reciprocal. What does reciprocity mean? Give and take. Exactly. It's a benefit for everyone involved, right? Unlearn entitlement. That one's a hard one. That involves emotional literacy. Unlearn entitlement. Learn to practice consent everywhere. Relationships, not resources. So how are you all doing? I feel like we've been going for a while, and I can feel like a low, we like hit a low energy vibe. I don't know if you feel that, but I feel like there's like a lot of weight. Like we're sitting under a lot of weight right now. How's everybody doing? Yeah. So I'm going to actually invite you. Oh yeah, I see. There's a lot of weight, but it's necessary. And you're, oh, thank you. I want to invite everyone just to take a deep breath with me, if you're open to it. Just remember to breathe, just natural breathing, and just notice what it's like to breathe. And notice what it's like to be alive in your body. Notice how the chair feels underneath you, or the floor feels beneath your feet, or what the air feels like on your skin. And if you're open to it, I actually would like to do something with you physical. It's kind of silly, but it can awaken our energy a little bit. I'm going to stand for it. You can stand or stay seated. It's up to you. But if you stand, it can give you a little bit of energy. So not everybody's body does this. This is my Métis sash. It's my regalia. I was just wearing it for my power, my sense of my own culture. So, you know, when an animal goes through like a trauma and they like shake it off, like you see them like shake their whole body, there's a reason they do that. And I want to invite you to kind of shake this off with me. So if you would like, you can take one hand or one limb, and you can, in a minute, we're going to count 8 times, and we're going to use our voices too. Using your voice can awaken lots of energy centers. So like we'll count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then we'll do it with the other limb, or you can modify this for your body. And then we'll do it with like our foot 8 times, our other foot 8 times, and then our hips 8 times. Okay, you can also do it this way. I work with youth, so I do it this way with them, but I do it this way with adults usually. And then we'll do it 4 times. And then we'll do it 2 times. And then on the last one, we'll go, ha, or ha, if you want. But I really do encourage you to do this, because it really helps to like shake it out. And I encourage you to use your voices too, even if there's other people in the building. You know, take care of yourself if you can. So are you ready? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 1, 1, 1. Ha! Okay. Feel free to have a seat. Now I have to catch my breath. How do you feel? Do you feel a little bit more alive? Yes, I see. Yeah. Do you feel a little more like embodied? And laugh. I see an LOL. That was fun. I love this one because you can't really not laugh. It kind of makes you laugh every time. Like, it's so silly, but it also like activates all the important points, you know. And you know, when we're talking about hard things, we tend to leave our bodies. So coming back together, using our voice helps us to use our breath also, and it just shakes up the energy. So, thank you. I feel better too. Now, are there any questions? Is there anything alive in the space that you want to talk about before I move on to some Prezi stuff that I made for you? Some framework stuff. Feel free to jump in. Maybe I'll, because we've been talking about acknowledging the land, I'm going to see if I can share a video with you real quick. It's just short, but it takes me a sec. So just bear with me while I find it. I didn't show a video last time, right? Okay. Can you all see the video on the screen? Yes? Okay, good. And let me know if you can hear it. This is the Baroness Von Sketch Show, which is a hilarious Canadian comedy troupe, which I highly encourage you to watch. I think it's on Netflix. They're talking about land acknowledgements, because here in Canada, people do land acknowledgements a lot, and it doesn't really mean anything, but it's just a funny little take here. Can you hear that?
Hello.
You can't. Okay.
Hello. First, I'd like to remind everyone here to turn off your cell phones. Before we begin this evening's performance, we would like to acknowledge that this theater stands on territory of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Huron-Wendat, and the Petun First Nations. We are also mindful of broken covenants and the need to make right with all our relations. And now, please enjoy the show.
Oh, sorry. Hello. Sorry. Excuse me. Should we go?
Excuse me?
Oh no. I just mean if we're on someone else's land, shouldn't we leave?
Oh no. The theater is here now. We'd just like to acknowledge whose land it is.
I'm sorry. I'm so confused. So if we're on someone else's land, shouldn't we do something about that? Or
hopefully we'll enjoy the performance.
oh, okay. So some of the money from the ticket sales of the show are going to the Indigenous communities?
Well, no.
A portion of them?
No, the ticket sales go to the theater.
So is the money from the bottled water sold here going to the First Nations for clean drinking water? Or?
Oh no, that money goes to Nestle. They're a sponsor.
I'm so sorry. I'm so confused. So whose land are we on? What are we doing?
It's a dialogue.
How are we making right?
Well, there's a plaque you can read in the lobby.
I don't understand.
I'm getting a message from the stage manager that we need to begin the show, so please take your seats. But have a good time.
But
good night.
So sit down. Enjoy the show. Just enjoy the show.
Right? So, thoughts? What do you think?
Platitudes. Just acknowledging and not doing anything about it, having that plaque up in the hallway. Oh, we did something, it means absolutely nothing. You have to take some serious and more direct action and make reparations, all that stuff.
Exactly. So I just wanted to give you a little laugh, but I have a framework that I've created to help us understand the system of oppression and how it plays out in what we're talking about. And then also I've created a framework for like the practice of coming back to like how to indigenize, like how do we indigenize, like how do we heal, you know? So let me see where I put it. First, I want to talk about power, if I can find it, and talk about how there are basically, I don't know why it does that. This is an old Prezi that I did a long time ago. There's 3 kinds of power that I want to talk about today that we've talked about a little bit already. So understanding power within a colonial context is like we're used to power over, which is, you know, on the left, this system. It manifests as systemic, right? It manifests as like a hierarchical relationship. There's an authoritative methodology to power over someone else. You know, when we think of power, we often think of like a king, you know, or even like a superhero might be an example, which we can talk about. But like authority, and then the pedagogy is punitive and shame-based. Colonialism is like profoundly shame-based. And you know, in the prison industrial complex, that is in service to the colonial narrative. Indigenous cultures, many indigenous cultures don't have a practice of being punitive. It's a practice of calling people in, drawing them toward each other. And sometimes there are things you can't heal, but it's like, are we going to commit to healing together? And like however long that takes, it might take weeks to just be together in healing as a community. The whole community is involved. And power over is achieved through like theft. It's taken or it's vested. So the government state, the governmental state of America, of the US or Canada, those are vested. You know, it's not earned inherently. It's not inherently earned. Those are the people who have been selected. That's the system that was selected by the power that was already taken originally. Now, over on the right here, no, in the middle, is often the answer to being in a state of power over. This is like a sort of capitalistic take, you know, like self-help books are often really obsessed with this power within. You can do it. That narrative that like Oprah did it, so you can do it. There's room for everyone, but there's only one Oprah, you know, like there's only one. Like, yeah, there's power within, but also everything has to come together, and there isn't room for everyone within this colonial state. So the manifestation of power within, it's good. It's a good kind of power for sure. It's agency, you know, like it's a personal kind of power. The relationship is about the self. It's independent. And I think I noticed I said last time, like Independence Day is like how I think of the US, and it's like such a narrative of like the self, you know, as opposed to the collective. Methodology is agency or will, which we all need and we all have, we're born with. It's our birthright. And the pedagogy is how it shows up is through responsibility and integrity, through our own agency toward responsibility and integrity, which is great. That's good. We all have choices we can make. It's just that our choices are limited within a system of power over, right? Especially if we are unaware of how the culture of being punitive and the culture of shame is influencing our own concepts of what is even possible, right? And it is achieved through, it's inherent, it's our birthright. It is achieved through existing. And it is also, though, achieved through knowing that we have it and that we deserve it. So if you're raised in a way that, can you all see this actually? Are you there? Did I lose you?
We're here. We can't know. We got you. You're still with us, but we can't see.
Okay, you can't see it.
No.
Okay, damn. Let's see if I can do this again. Shoot. But you got it. You got the gist of it, right? Okay, I'm gonna
We
try
got
it.
the gist, yeah.
I don't know why I always have this problem.
Oh, it looks like it's working now. Oh, beautiful. Beautiful.
That's not the one. This is the one. Okay, can you see that? Power over, power within, and power with.
Yes, it looks great.
Oh,
Well,
gosh.
we can't see the full slide. Like I can, it's cut off a little bit in the
But you
view.
can see all the words, right?
Absolutely.
That's all that matters. So, so yes, so the manifestation of power over systemic, right? Power within. And then I think that that's kind of where the idea of power tends to stop in a colonial culture. It tends to be power over and power within. It's like, I have agency. I can read the self-help books. I can like do it myself. I can make it happen. There's a lot of like spiritual and emotional bypassing that happens with that narrative, which is like, it's all up to me. It takes us back to the Maslow's hierarchy that we were talking about last time. And if you didn't see that, I encourage you to go back, where Maslow took this collective intergenerational concept and made it individualized in service of capitalism. It's got that same vibe, right? And the self-actualization side of it with the Maslow's hierarchy, it looks like do what you love, find your passion, reach your potential, discover your calling, self-help, self-love. And those things, I'm not saying they're bad. It's just that within a context of oppression, within a context of colonialism, that works if you have access to privilege. That works if you have those things available to you, and it appears to be neutral because it's invisible if you have that access. You don't realize when you have the access, you just have it, and you think that everybody has it, but that's not true. And so what my invitation is to consider, what does power with mean? Rather than manifesting at a systemic level, we take our personal power and we offer it to a collective power. We connect as a collective, we work together in circle, yeah. And the relationships, rather than hierarchical or just me, it's interdependence. It's like, I'm not just me. What I do affects you, and what you do affects me, whether I admit it or not. Every single thing I do is in relationship with everything else. The methodology, rather than authority, like I know what's best, and rather than just like my own agency, is working in consensus, in community, and finding a sense of equity, not equality, right? Equality is like, I don't want to be equal. I don't want to be equal to the leaders of the colonial capitalist state. I don't want anything to do with it. I want justice and I want equity. I want us to experience, to have access to the resources that we specifically need. Like, the resources I need might be different than the resources you need. And the pedagogy is about respect and accountability. I am not only responsible, I am accountable to not only the collective, but to all of life everywhere. What is my accountability to all of life everywhere? And it is achieved through being earned. And then it is also achieved through sharing. It's shared amongst the people. Some cultures have rotational leadership. In fact, some cultures don't have a concept. I feel like in Indigenous culture, the concept of leadership is very, very different. It's not really the right word. The word is governance and community. And we look to our elders and our matriarchs, but also our youth, have so much wisdom. Everybody has something profoundly important to offer. And then it looks like community actualization. It looks like, civic engagement, service, sacrifice, you know, I feel like sacrifice in a colonial context means sacrifice and then you get nothing back. but sacrifice within an indigenized context, it actually, you inherently already have, and you already receive, and you will continue to receive. So it's not like a colonial idea of sacrifice where there isn't something in place where everybody is getting their needs met. So if you sacrifice, then you just sacrifice here, you know. It's different. And compromise and collaboration is understanding. I really feel like collaboration is a better word, but also the right word there should be reciprocity. It's a practice of right relationships and reciprocity. So with this understanding of power in mind, and like reframing our ideas about what power even is, you know, when we've been raised in a colonial construct, I'm curious about how people are feeling or what you're thinking, like what's coming up for you around this. I'm going to stop the share in 3, 2.
That was really powerful. Just to, I think even last time you said something, you know, in American culture, we have this idea like we got to reconcile it and do the things. And you even suggested like, well, maybe that's not the goal. And sort of this idea, you know, our culture is so big on like individual responsibility. Like if you don't feel powerful, it's probably your own fault. And that's part of this whole picture, that sort of deliberate making invisible of the power structures. The impact of trauma is that we all kind of shut down and feel shameful and keep to ourselves and don't connect. So just, wow, the many levels that this hits on and impacts on really blows me away.
I feel that I tend to work in the realm, I see a comment, I work in the realm of power with, but I'm often chastised for being weak or not confident. I mean, yes. And that comes to like the next piece that I want to share, which is about binarization. I know we have to go in 10 minutes. And this idea of like, what is power and what is strength is gendered, it's racialized, it's binarized, and it's, you are one or the other. And that is on purpose. There's no accident, which I'll bring up again in a sec. Okay, I'm gonna open up another screen. And see if I can share. Takes me a minute here. Folks, thanks for bearing with me.
I do love all the things people shared in chat too. I think, you know, we're so conscious of the power structures and we never ever talk about events with a power analysis, right? We just act like everyone has the same amount of power in the world. And it's really new for us to recognize that if you are non-white or non-male, you don't have the same, we're not all given the same amount of power in any way, shape, or form. And of course, it's going to play out in everything we do.
Yeah. So can you all see my screen? Okay. So there is this framework called the Staircase of Oppression, which, oh shoot, I forget the name of the medical professional who created it originally, but it also came to me through an organization here in Vancouver called Connects, and now it's called PeerNet BC. But if we think of like what is oppression, if we think of like there's a staircase leading to the system of oppression, And we can think of like oppression as sort of the isms that manifest in our lives. And we want to look at the steps to get to oppression. We need to look at the foundation first. The foundation before we get to these steps of oppression is dehumanization and objectification. So Michael brought that up earlier. We dehumanize people so that we can objectify them. That is rape culture, right? Objectifying someone is like I objectify this pen. I use the pen in service of myself. And it creates a sense of unrootedness. When we are dehumanized, it disconnects us from the community. And it's out of a sense of unrootedness also. So like settler colonizers are unrooted. That like coming to a new land is unrooted. And then it's recreating that unrootedness, taking people from their homelands to enslave them, taking children from their homelands to steal their language and culture and family ties. It creates more unrootedness, creates more unrootedness unless we heal it. And settler colonizers often are walking around without even realizing how unrooted they even are. You know, it's very, very deep. It's also the foundation is an unfulfilled search for belonging and understanding. So when you're unrooted, you don't have a felt body sense of belonging, whether you know it or not. Whether you know it or not. And that leads to the misappropriation that we were talking about at the beginning, like the dream catcher, you know, it leads to taking from other people's culture because you don't feel you have your own culture. If you don't feel you have your own culture, you need to fill that void up in some way. And so then it becomes, if the culture is capitalism, then it becomes commodification of other people's spiritual practices, other people's art, other people's cultures, other people's ways. And people don't even realize that there's just such a sense of that's cool, that's mine now, I'm going to do that. And meanwhile, the people who do it are literally punished for their own practices, and the dominant culture is being celebrated for it. Connection through nationalism and tribalism. We talked about the nationalism, you know. The foundation of oppression is creating a nation state for your identity, like identifying with the nation state because you don't have one. The foundation is a shame and creating the other creation of the other, which I think Amy mentioned at the beginning. The other, like we need an other in order to center the self and have power. And that all leads to trauma and all comes from trauma. So the foundation is a narrative of dominance and supremacy rooted in centuries of trauma. And when you add a single story about a group of people, which Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie has a TED talk about the danger of a single story. It's like US has a single story about Canada, but I have a complex story about the US because I see so much, but you probably see a few things about here. And it's even worse about like the idea, she talks about the idea of like Africa as a so-called country, like it's not a country, right? And that the US tends to have that single story about like all Africans are this. So when you add that single story, which is really a stereotype, right, to the foundation of dehumanization, it's coming from like this it's coming out of this need for belonging. Like I need to belong to a group, so I need you to be other. So I stereotype you, I have a single story about you, and then I am the center. I get to be part of this. I get to be part of something. And then I'm not left with that sense of isolation and loneliness that I deeply am feeling because I've been uprooted to begin with. And then we add a value and centering of our own stories and experiences over everyone else's. That leads to prejudging, to prejudice, which is an unconscious bias or leads to unconscious bias. So like, I don't even know what I think I know about you. Like, I think I know a lot of things about you, but I don't even realize that I think that. Like, I just see you and now I know your story because I have this single story about you that creates I'm prejudging you before I ever speak with you. It's hard because my screen's a bit too small and I can't move things around properly. So the next is you add action to prejudice and you get discrimination, right? And that includes microaggressions, but it also includes macroaggressions. So like, it could be small comments all the way to like literally like genocide and murder, right? Discrimination. But the thing is, up until here, anybody can do any of these things against anybody else. Like an Indigenous person can do any of these things to settlers. And it would be stereotyping and prejudice and discrimination, and that would suck, right? It sucks to discriminate against people. But, oh man. Sorry, you guys, I really am not good at this. Here we go. You have to add systemic power for it to become oppression. So anybody can be an asshole. But this is why reverse racism is not a thing, right? This is why when when somebody is discriminated against, okay, so let's say like I have an Indigenous girls circle, right? Boys, men are not allowed there. Non-binary people are welcome, you know, but like, it's not for any settlers and it's not for any non-Indigenous people. It's not for boys. That is discrimination, frankly, but it's not oppression. It's out of actually service to keeping ourselves safe, you know, and creating a space for healing. And so there's this thing, this comes from PeerNet BC, which is the glass ceiling of privilege. This glass ceiling of privilege is in between discrimination and oppression, right? It's not oppression until you have broken through that glass ceiling, the systemic power that is inherent. And systemic power lives in the institutions. I'm just gonna keep going. Here we go. And the institutions include every single institution. Systemic power lives in every single institution. The education system, the police and military, the prison industrial complex, the medical industrial complex, including alternative healing, reproductive rights, food systems, media, financial system, jobs, class systems, marriage and relationships, social stigmas and taboos, religion. Literally every single institution is in service of oppressive systems in this culture. It's all in service of it. And so if you are a person with access, with privilege, you probably don't feel it. You know, you walk in and they're in service. They're designed to be in service to you. But if you're a person that doesn't have that access, you feel it. And that's why when we find ourselves in positions of privilege and power, it is our job to listen to people who see the world through a lens that we'll never see. We need to believe people, you know, and you know, I have this, I'm going to actually come back to this screen share in a sec. I know we're running out of time, but I really want to make sure I get through this properly so that we end on a good note. So raise your hand if you ever went to school. Okay. How are the classes usually set up in like how seated? How are people usually seated? In rows. I see you going like this, rows. And who's at the front? The teacher. And what does this tell us about power?
Teacher has all the power and the students don't.
Exactly. It's literally set up in a hierarchy. And stereotypically, who's usually sitting at the front of the classroom? It's a stereotype. I know it's a stereotype, but just let's go with it. Who's
Smart kid.
Pardon?
Smart kid.
Okay, exactly. The so-called smart kids, the good kids, the keeners. Who's sitting in the back row?
The troublemakers.
Exactly, the bad kids. Okay, so I saw somebody say this on your in the chat. What if we reframe it? Because this is the language of the teacher. These are the good kids and the bad kids. What if these are the kids that are most able to fit themselves into the system, or are most benefiting from the system, are the best fit for this system, right? And these are the kids who are the least served by this system. That changes the way we look at it, you know? And when we think about this, right? Yeah. Like when we think about this, these kids can do something these kids can't. When you're sitting at the back of the classroom, what can you do other than slack off? What can you do that the kids at the front can't do?
See the whole page.
You can see everything. So when we're at the front of the class, when we're in a position of privilege, which we all have positions of privilege in areas of our lives, we can't see the whole picture. When we're at the back of the class, we can see it way more clearly than anybody else. We can see it better, you know, and they can also subvert that system when you're at the back because people aren't looking at you. So even though there's a penalty to not being looked at, not being seen, there's also power in being able to subvert, you know, and marginalized people have been doing that since the beginning of marginalization, have been subverting and reclaiming power in powerful ways. Now, as Indigenous people, I asked you to look in your gallery view so we could see each other at the beginning, so that it would be like a circle, because as Indigenous people, our classrooms are life, right? This life is a classroom. But like when we're together, we're not sitting in rows, we're sitting in circle. And what does this teach you about power?
We're all equal and we can all see each other.
Yes, we're all equal and we can all see each other. And when we can all see each other, I said this last time, we are responsible to one another. You know, we are responsible for ourselves because everybody can see us. And it tells us that our voices are all of our voices matter, no matter who we are, no matter what our station is, we all count. And so when we reframe, how do we reframe society so that instead of it being a hierarchy, it's a circle? How do we reframe, how do we reimagine the culture that we exist inside of so it is circular? And if we think about this as the country, like the US, or here when I do this, Canada, who could be an example of this person? The president, exactly. So I'm going to put Biden. And then I'm also going to say my prime minister, so-called mine, which I call J. True. You might have heard of him, Justin Trudeau. So Biden and J. True share a lot of things in common, right? What identities do they have in common?
White, male.
They're both, yeah, they're both cisgender. They were assigned to be male at birth and they identify as male. They're straight, apparently.
Privileged.
Yeah, so what you're saying there, the privileged, that's all of this. Like all of these things are the privileges. And then I'm going to add them. These are like, we're breaking down the privileges. Exactly. So I'm going to say class privileged, like they both come from economic class privilege. They come from education class privilege. Here in Canada, like J. True speaks English and French, which are both privileged, even though French is not privileged above English, it's privileged above Indigenous languages and languages of migrants. So white, male, cis, straight, educated, class, they're neurotypical, you know, their brains tend to be like everybody else, or what's expected. They're both enabled physically, you know, and they're both non-fat, which of course nobody's non-fat. Everybody has fat on their body or they're dead, basically. But fat is a political identity, so they're non-fat, right? And J-True, and I would even say Biden might have been this one at one point, but there's age involved there that's like ageism. But J-True has pretty privilege, okay? He looks the way that you're told you're supposed to look. And all, like, just layer after layer after layer, they represent who they are meant to represent. And that's why people were so angry about Obama, even though Obama also fits almost all these categories except for one. So when you have one category that's not covered, that's a lot. That's a lot. And when you have more than one, that is a lot. That's a lot, you know? So like if you're a person who only has one category that's marginalized, you know how painful that is. So you can imagine the pain of all of the other categories, you know? How am I doing for time? Oh my gosh, I'm 10 minutes over. I'm so sorry. I didn't realize.
That's all right. People have been dropping off, but you know, it's such good, valuable information. Who wants to stop? And so, yes, I hate to end. And I know that we could talk about this for hours. Anna told me she sometimes does like 8-hour workshops. And I was like, I could see that. We'll certainly share out the recording. I put Anna's email website on there. I know people might want to get in touch with her or learn more about it. And please do. She's available. And I guess, thank you so much.
Thank you
for this really powerful, thought-provoking, monumental session.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been my joy and my honor. And thank you for letting me share my medicine that I came here in the world to share. And also thank you for sharing your medicine with me, because I'm going to walk away feeling empowered and grateful. So thank you.
Us too. Thank you for bringing it around to a place of feeling hopeful.
Yeah.
Much appreciated.
So much more hopefulness to share with you. I didn't get to it.
All right. Well, maybe we will have to figure something out then. I'm sure there will be venues to hear more from you, because people can't get enough. We need this. We need this work. We need these conversations. They're not happening in the US. And just so grateful that you've been willing to talk to us about this, because we've all been lied to quite a bit in our culture.
Yeah.
Anna, the organization that I work for, we host what's called a DEI, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion speaker series. I'd like to be able to see what we can do about possibly getting you on that speaker series, to be able to give you the opportunity to share and bring this information, real powerful, powerful in some ways. They say sometimes you just have to rip that Band-Aid off. It's a lot easier and a lot quicker to just rip the Band-Aid off and let's speak truths, and truths are the things that transform, you know what I mean? And when people speak truths, and you just come in here and sharing everything that you shared, and just, I think, opening it up and making it comfortable enough for everyone to share and people to be vulnerable and to open up and share. I think it's real. it's uplifting and it's encouraging. So I'd like to drop my email in the chat. And I'd love to be able to connect with you and be able to, you know, to that speaker series.
I have just put my website in the chat, and you can contact me through my website on the contact page.
Okay.
So feel free to get in touch with me, and also just in case anybody wants to message me more directly, my email is also, I'm putting my email in here, and I'm also on Facebook. Thank you, Noel. That would be awesome, and I really appreciate everything you shared today.
Thank you.
Yeah, and everybody, again, feel free to friend me on Facebook. I share a lot about decolonization and understanding systems of power, and also just like fun, cute things too. But deep, always deep, usually. Yeah.
All right.
I send a friend request so that we can connect as well. I mean, and if you go on my page, you'll see everything that we do has to do with recovery, has to do with addiction and recovery, and trying to support the community, but not only the community, but also the Indigenous community as well. So
great. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I hate to even stop. We got to do what we got to do. I'm sure they need the Zoom back. So thanks so much, Anna. You're the best ever.
You're the best.
Thank you all for being here. It's so appreciated. And we'll see you all again somehow, some way, sometime soon. Thanks again.
Can you not jump off yet until we get a copy of this?
Oh yeah, you can save the chat on your own desktop if you want, with the 3 dots in the chat message.
Okay.
You got that?
I'm trying to do it right now.
All right.
Thank you, Anna, so very much. I'm looking forward to collaborating with you as well. I have a couple of things I want to share with you and see what you think.
Amazing, Bella. I would really love that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Amy's already done it, so she can give it the proof of seal of approval.
Agree. All right. Thanks again, everybody. Bye. You got that okay, Noel? Yeah.
No, I didn't get it for some reason. It's not saving.
I will save it and send it back to you.
And you're gonna post this on the same, like on Facebook, right?
Yes.
And
I just found this under events. I didn't even know. You know, I saw the Trauma Tuesdays, and I was like, what? And I just happened to see it. So I don't know where I would find this information.
I will email you some stuff.
So you have my email? I could drop it in the chat, because I don't think, did I drop it in there already?
I think I have your email.
Well, let's just make sure. So
okay,
that,
yeah.
You know,
don't want to drop this at all.
No, not at all. This is important stuff. I think it's going right, you know. Yeah.
Amy, can I connect with you after?
I have a couple things, like a little bit later. Can we do that?
Yeah. Message me when you're available.
Okay, I sure will. Thanks again.
Thank you
so much.
Okay, bye.
Bye.